Hey guys, welcome to day 31 of 100 Days of Code. And you've been learning quite a lot of things now. We've been looking at handling exceptions, using the JSON data format, parsing and reading CSVs using pandas, opening and writing to files, and a whole lot more. So it's time for your Capstone project. And in this Capstone project, we're going to be building a flashcard program to help you study. And it's especially great with studying for languages. Now, when I was in school, I studied French, and it was a lot of vocab that we had to learn for tests. Pomme is apple. And I would memorize all these words, all of the grammar tables, and yet after 4 or 5 years, I couldn't really speak much French. So I decided to go for immersive language learning. I went to France, I hung out with friends, and I tried to immerse myself in the language and culture. But that also failed. I had a lot of fun, but my French didn't seem to improve all that much. But then I discovered a new way of learning languages, and it all started with looking at Chinese characters. There's a lot of Chinese characters out there. There's something like 50,000 Chinese characters in total. From history to now, there's a lot of characters that you could learn. They each have a different meaning and they each have a different pronunciation. Imagine that, trying to learn 50,000 characters. That's no easy feat. But then a friend told me that actually, you don't really need 50,000 characters. Your average professor who is very eloquent, who can write a lot of the characters and use them with ease, only knows about 10,000. And your average person probably only uses about 8,000 in their day-to-day lives. And if you basically just want to get by in life, you can pretty much rely on the 3,000 words that an average teenager would know. And finally, if you actually just want to be able to watch some simple movies, read some simple books, then you could use the average kid vocabulary of about 1,000 characters. And at this point, I think to myself, 1,000, that's quite doable. I could do 1,000. If I learn just 10 characters a day, that'll take me less than a year to learn all of these characters. But it's not just 1,000 random characters either. There's such a thing as a frequency dictionary. So a dictionary that's not listed by A, B, C, D, but it's actually listed by the frequency that a particular word occurs in common usage. For example, if you take the first 1,000 characters that are most commonly used, then you can pretty much read most of the newspapers, you can watch most of the TV shows, because these are the words that are the bread and butter of the language. It's like in English, the a, the, of, from, why, yes, no. These are words that we use every day, again and again. The crazy words like anti-establishment or glioblastoma, these are not words that you need to really know for day-to-day life. So let me show you the program that you'll build where you can learn the most frequently used words in any language. It's a flashcard program, and it shows you the front and the back of the card. So, for example, French demande in English means request. After 3 seconds, the card flips and I can check whether if I knew the right answer. If I got it right, I'll press the tick, and if I got it wrong, I'll press the cross. So let's try another word. Partir means left or to leave. Attendez means to wait. And I think I knew that word, so I'm going to click the check mark. And what that's going to do is it's going to take the flashcard out of all of the list of flashcards so it doesn't show me the things I already know. And instead, it only shows me the things I don't know, so I can review it and say, oh, I'm not sure what loin means, so I'll say cross, and that will go back into the deck and it might come up again at some point. So this beautiful piece of software is what we're going to be creating, but more specifically, you're going to be creating, because after all, this is your capstone project. But don't worry, I've divided up into 4 steps and I've got some step-by-step instructions for you in the next lesson. Now, if you're wondering, how did you get the most frequent words for the flashcard app in the first place? Well, let me show you. There's a wiki for the frequency lists of different languages, and it lists most of the common languages. If we go to French, you can see that there are loads of different lists that people have compiled that list the top most frequently occurring words. And one of the ones that I thought was really relevant is the words that are based on subtitles. These subtitles come from all sorts of shows and movies that are relevant to modern culture. And when you look at one of the subtitles, this is one of my favorite shows, by the way, you can see that the subtitles are listed by language. And if we pick out one which is in English and we take a look at it, then you can see it's basically just all the words that are spoken in the movie or in the show, and it's been transcribed into subtitles. Now then, if we take all of these words that are from the most commonly watched movies and shows, we end up with these frequency lists. So if we take a look here, it shows the most frequent words from 1 to 5,000. And at the very beginning, it's your I, of, is, all of these things that are really common. And then as you scroll down, you get to some longer words. And if you scroll to the bottom, you can see you're getting some more and more niche words. These frequency lists are compiled by a user called Hermit D. And Hermit D is Hermit Dave, and he has a GitHub repository where he's compiled all of the frequency words. And you can see the latest version from 2018. Now he's got all of the frequency words for many languages, and it's listed by the language code. So French would be FR, for example. And here you can see the top 50,000 most frequent list or the full entire list. We're probably not going to learn more than 1,000, and I'm certainly not going to get to 50,000. But this data here lists all the words that he found in these subtitles and the frequency that they occurred. And once they've been sorted in order of frequency, this is what you end up with. So I've already studied some of the first 200 words. So if I take 100 words from this frequency dictionary and I put it into a Google Sheet, then I end up with something like this. Now, what I want to be able to do is to create a flashcard where the front of the flashcard is the word in French, and then on the back of the flashcard is the answer in English for what that word means. Instead of having to flip through a dictionary, finding out the meaning of each of these words, there's actually a really neat trick in Google Sheets that I want to show you. If you hit equals to start a new formula and you type in Google Translate, you can see it expects some inputs. First is the piece of text that you want to translate. So I'm going to click on this cell, and then it's the source language. So this is the language as a code. So for example, Spanish is ES and French is FR. And then the final input it expects is the language code that you want to translate it to. So in this case, I want to translate it to English. So I'm going to use EN. And then we can close off the parentheses, hit enter, and after a little while, with good internet, you'll see the English translation for this word. And of course, because we're in Excel, we can simply just drag this cross all the way down to all of our words, and after a little while, bam, it's translated all of those words into English. So this is a really neat trick, and I'll link to the docs for this particular formula. And also, you can take a look at the language support that Google's translation service has, and you can see the language code for each of these languages. So if you want to try learning Macedonian or Malay, then this is going to be your best bet. So now that I've created my Excel sheet, essentially, of French and English words, I've got potentially 100 flashcards with the front and back data already saved inside this Google Sheet. Now all I have to do is simply download it as a CSV, and we'll be able to work with it very easily. Now, you don't have to worry about downloading this or getting hold of this because I've already included the final CSV data in the starting project for you to be able to use. So head over to the next lesson and get started building your very own study aid, the flashy flashcard app. Alright, so hopefully you've headed over to the course resources and downloaded the starting zip file for today's project. So go ahead and unzip it, and then let's open up this folder using PyCharm. Here you've already got two folders, data and images. We're going to be using all of these images inside the images folder to create our project. So this is the front of the flashcard, the back of the flashcard, the right button and the wrong button. And we're going to be writing our code inside main.py. So notice here we've already got the background color hex code defined, so we'll be able to use it in our coding as well. This is what we're aiming for. This is the user interface for this program. It's going to have a window with a title, and inside this window we're going to have the card front image here showing up, and on that card we're going to have two pieces of text, a word that says title and a piece of text that just says word. And these are going to be formatted according to the instructions, so in terms of font and size, etc. Finally, at the bottom, we've got two buttons, a cross and a check mark, and they're basically buttons that have the images right and wrong inside them. Let's get started. Inside main.py, the first thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and import tkinter. So I'm going to import all the classes from tkinter, and then I'll be able to use it to create my window. I'm going to set a title for my window, and I'm going to give it the name of our app, which is going to be called Flashy, or whatever it is you want to call it. Next, I'm going to give this window a configuration, and I'm going to set the padding of the window to 50 pixels in the X and 50 pixels in the Y. Now, this window is also going to have a background color, which is going to be set to this background color constant that we have up here. So now that I'm done configuring my window, I can go ahead and get my window to start off in the main loop, and now I should be able to run this code and just check that it works. Here's our window with the background color, and there's already some padding in it, making this window a little bit bigger. Now, the next thing to do is to somehow put this card front image onto our window. I'm going to be using a canvas object. And if you remember, the canvas object allows us to layer lots of things on top of each other. So here is an image, and then on top of that we've got some text being created. And as long as we specify the position for each of these items, it can all be overlapped on top of each other. So we're creating our canvas from the canvas class, and then I'm going to give my canvas a width and a height. So I'm going to set the width and height to be the same as the width and height of my card. So the width is 800 and the height is 526. You should have seen these numbers in the instructions as well. Next, we're going to create our image from the photo image class. So let's call it card front underscore image. And this is going to be created from the photo image class, where we have to specify a file name. Now, previously, all we've done is we've just said the actual name of the file, which in this case is cardfront.png. But in our case, this particular file is actually inside our images folder. So we have to specify the full file path for this to work, images/cardfront.png. And then we can get hold of our canvas and create our image inside. So the image is going to be set to our card front image, and then we have to specify the X and Y values of that image. So because it needs to go into the center of the canvas, we're just going to halve the width for the X and halve the height for the Y. So this goes in as a tuple. So half of 526 is 263. And then I'm just going to put our canvas onto the grid, and I'm going to set the row to 0 and the column to 0 as well. Now, just be careful when you're writing strings like this, because it's pretty easy to make a typo like I have here. Instead, I prefer using PyCharm's autofill. So when you have a file path, you can type in the name of the folder, / and then the name of the file, and we can just hit enter for it to insert it for us automatically. Now, if I go ahead and hit run, then I'll see that I've got a background which has the background color, and then 50 pixels of padding on all four sides. In the middle, I've got my canvas displaying this card front PNG. The only thing about this card is that it's still got that white background. How do we get rid of that? Well, we can change the background into the same color as everything else, so this background color. Let's go ahead and get our canvas, and then let's config it to have a background color that's set equal to our constant, like this. Now the background color is the same, but we now have a line that is all around our canvas. If you remember from previous lessons, I told you that you can simply get rid of the highlight thickness and set it to 0. And that basically just gets rid of that border. So now we have a window with our flashcard showing up, and the image has the shadows which I created in Illustrator, so that you'll be able to see it as a 3D card. Now inside the card, not only do we have an image, but we also want to have some text. So let's go ahead and create some text, and we can set the text to say title. So this is the first piece of text. In addition, I'm going to set the font to a tuple, which is going to use the Arial font, and then it's going to be 40 size. And finally, I'm going to make it italic. Now, before we can hit run, we also have to specify a X and Y position for our text. So our image was created at 400x263y. Our text is going to be created at 400x and 150y. Now remember that these positions are relative to the canvas. So 400 makes it halfway along the width, and then this 150 is going to make it a little bit towards the top. So that's a good position for the title. Next, we're going to create another piece of text, and this piece of text is going to be the actual word. So the French word or the English word. So we're going to set it at the center of our canvas, so exactly centered on the image. And then we're going to say that the text is going to be equal to the word, for now anyways. Later on we'll probably change it. And then the font is again also Arial. And this time it's going to be a bit bigger, and it's also going to be bold. So there we have it. We've got our flashcard pretty much all laid out. Now we just have to add our 2 buttons. Below our canvas, I'm going to create 2 buttons. First is going to be the unknown button. This is going to be the X, which the user presses because they don't know what's on the back of the flashcard. And this button is going to have a special attribute though, the image attribute. And that image is going to be a photo image. So let's put this as the cross image, and it's going to be a photo image which is going to be created from the images folder, and it is the wrong.png. And that image is what's going to go inside our unknown button. Let's go ahead and lay out our unknown button on the grid so that it'll actually show up. Row is going to be 1, so below the canvas, and then column is going to be 0. So now you can see our X button show up here. Next, I'm going to create the check image. This is going to be the check mark. And in this case, it's again a photo image created from a file, which is in our images /write.png. And of course, you can always just double click on each of these images and view them and just make sure that they are the ones that you want to use. So once we've got our image, we can create our known button. And this is going to now have a image attribute set to this check image. And then we can place our known button onto the grid as well. So row equals 1 and column is going to be equal to 1 as well. So it's on the same row as the unknown button, but it's just shifted a little bit to the right. Now at this point, if I run the code, you can see that our check button is all the way on the right, while our canvas and our cross button are in the leftmost column. So you know what you need to do. You have to change this canvas grid to have a column span of 2. So it starts at column 0 but ends at column 1. Now when you run it, you can see it's nicely placed onto the screen in the way that we want it to look. Now, if you want to get rid of the border around the buttons, then the easiest way is to again change the highlight thickness to 0. So let's add that here and here. But both on Mac and Windows, you'll see this fine line around the button. And it's not easy to get rid of it because it's there so that you can click on the button and you can see this visible depression. That way it lets the user know that the button press was actually successful. But that's fine, and we're now pretty much done with our user interface. In the next step, we're going to get rid of these placeholders, title and word, and we're going to start picking out the words from this frenchwords.csv, picking out random records like this or this so that we can put the French word into right here and change the title to say French. For all of that and more, head over to the next lesson and see the instructions. Now that we've created the UI, the next step, or step 2, was to try and get the buttons to start working so that when we press the cross or the tick button, we get a new French word being shown in the middle here, and the title switches to the word French. So how do we do this? Well, firstly, for both of these buttons, the unknown and the known button, we're going to add a command. And remember, the command links to a particular function that is going to be called. So we'll call that next card. And we'll add that to both the known and the unknown buttons. Now that we've got next card added here, now let's go ahead and create this function, next card. What exactly is this function going to do? Well, it's going to take the words from the CSV, French words, and it's going to get hold of some of these words and their translations. So basically, you can imagine these as single rows that we want to get hold of. Now, what we need to do first, though, is we need to use pandas in order to read from that CSV. So we're going to first import pandas, and it should already be installed in your project. If not, you'll see a red light bulb, and then you can just click on it and then install that module. Once we've got pandas enabled, though, we're going to use pandas to read from a CSV. And the CSV is our French words CSV from the data folder. Now we're going to set this as equal to the data. So this is now going to be a data frame. And in fact, if I go ahead and print it, you can see that pandas will nicely format our table with the column headings and also record numbers, and each of these rows are basically the pieces of data that we're interested in. Now that we've got a data frame, we can convert that data frame into a dictionary. Let's go ahead and create a dictionary, which we'll call to learn. So that's the word we need to learn. And this is going to be a dictionary that's created from this data from this frenchwords.csv. But notice how at the moment, if we just use the default method of creating a dictionary, what our to learn is going to look like is like this. We've got French, and then inside we've got all of the French words, and then we've got a key later on called English and all of the corresponding English words. Now, that's not what we want. Instead, we want to change one of the parameters, which is orient. So how do we want to orient the table to create this dictionary? Now, in the hints for step 2, I already showed you that you could use this orient set to records, and this way it'll give you each column's values as a list. Let me show you what that looks like. So let's change this parameter orient, and we'll set it to equal the string records. Remember that there's an S at the end. And now we can compare the previous version of the dictionary that's generated from the data to the new version. So let me run the code again. And you can see now we've basically got a list of dictionaries. And each dictionary has a key French, the French word, a key English, and then the English word, and so on and so forth. This is really, really useful for us because we can basically pick a random entry from this list and we'll be able to tap into the French value and the English value later on when we flip our cards. That is our to learn dictionary done. So when the next card function gets called, then we're going to need to pick out some data from this dictionary. And the way that we're going to pick it out is randomly. So we're going to import the random module and we're going to use random.choice in order to pick out a random item from this list of words to learn. And once we've got a random choice, which we'll call current card, then we can get hold of the data from this current card by saying current card square brackets French. Remember that in this French word CSV, we've got a capital F and capital E, so our keys must match that exactly. So let's go ahead and print this, and you can see now that when I press on one of these buttons, either the cross or the tick, it's going to pick out a random French word from my list of words in this French word CSV. So now instead of printing it, let's go ahead and put it into these pieces of text on our canvas. In order to do that, I'm going to create a variable called card title to hold on to the title and the card word to hold on to the word text. And now I can go ahead and tap into my canvas and say item config. And the item that we want to configure is firstly our card title. And the thing we want to configure about it is to change the text to say French. So that's the title, remember, which is the part that's up here. And then we're going to do the same thing using canvas.itemConfig, but this time we're going to configure the card word. And this is going to be set to exactly what we printed before, which is the random card that was picked out and the value under the key French. So now when I hit run again, you can see that when I press either of these buttons, I'm going to get a random French word showing up right here. But notice how when I first run the app, you can see that it still has the placeholder title and word showing up. Instead, we want it to show the next card. So we have to call this function once we've created all of our UI, but before we get to our main loop. So we'll call our next card, and this way, once we've created all of our images and everything else, then we can generate the next card, get the data, and put it into the card title and card word. So in fact, if you want to, you can actually delete these two pieces of text because they won't actually do anything at the moment. And now, as soon as we hit run, you can see the first thing we see is already a French word, and it will keep going through all of the words that we have in our CSV. There you have it. We've now managed to read from the CSV, get a dictionary of all the records in the CSV, and to randomly get the French word showing up in our flashcard. our flashcard currently doesn't actually flash. It doesn't change, right? We need a way for us to be able to set some sort of a timer, say a 3-second timer, and then for our card to show us the opposite side or the back side and to show us the English translation of the words. That is what we're going to tackle on the next lesson. So head over to step 3 and have a read of the instructions. Now that we've got our words showing up in French, it's time to see the other side of the card and see the English equivalent so that we can check our knowledge. To do this, we're going to have to implement some sort of way of changing this card after a set amount of time. So we're going to flip the card after 3 seconds are up. To do that, we're going to use the window.after method. Right after here where we've created a window, we're going to say window.after, and then we can specify the amount of time in milliseconds. So I'm going to say 3 seconds or 3000 milliseconds. And then the function that we're going to call is a function that's going to be called flip card. And if we want that to work, then we're going to have to create it. So I'm going to create it right here, just above. So I'll call it flip card, and this function is going to take care of changing the card to show the English word for the current card. And we're also going to change the image from the card front to the card back. And also we're going to change the color of the text as well. In our flip card, we're going to get hold of the canvas and we're going to first item config the card title. So we're going to change the card title to, instead of saying French, we're going to say, well, this is now the English translation. And then we're going to config the card word. And this is going to be still from the current card, but we want to get hold of the value under the key English instead. Now at the moment, this current card is locked up inside next card, so we can't actually get hold of it without creating a new random choice. So what we can do is we can create our current card and we can set it to a empty dictionary, and then we can change this to a global and tap into that current card to modify it and save this random choice from our list of French and English pairs. So once we've got that inside there, then we can tap into it inside a flip card and we can say current card, get hold of the value under the English key. And that way we update both of our text. So right now, if I hit run, you can see that immediately after 3 seconds, we switch to the opposite side and we have our English and the English equivalent of the same word showing up. So for example, in French, matin, in English means morning. So that's how we can verify that we actually know the meaning of the card. In addition to changing the words, I'm also going to change the image. So notice how we saved the words with a variable. We can do the same thing for this create image method. We can say the card background is equal to canvas create image, and in addition to creating the card front image, we can also create the card back image. Now, you have to be really careful here, because if you create this card back image, which is a photo image created from file, if you create it inside one of these functions, by the end of the function call, that reference to that particular image will be gone, and it won't work if you create this photo image inside Flipkart and try to set it inside this method. So you have to create it outside of any of the functions. So let's change the file to images/cardback.png. And now we're going to get our canvas to again call item config. And this time we're configuring the card background. And the attribute that we want to configure is the image property. So we're going to change that to the card back image, which we created right here. So now let's just check that again. Let's wait 3 seconds, and then it's changed to the back of the card. On the back of the card, we want these two pieces of text to actually have a different color. We want it to be white, just so that it stands out from the background. And to do that, we can add it along with our item config. Not only are we changing the text, but we're also changing the fill of the text to white. And now when our card flips over, you can see it's a green card with a white text. Now, one of the things we have to do is every time we click on one of these buttons, it has to flip back to the front of the card, right? That means changing the text color and changing that background image. So that happens when we go to next card. So in addition to configuring the text and the words, we also again have to item config the card background so that we can change the image back to the card front image. In addition, we have to change these text colors to have a different fill. So we're going to change it back to black. This way, when the card flips, it goes to green, white on green, and then when we go to the front of the card, it goes to black on white. Now, notice how once we go to the next card, that card flipping mechanism is gone, because we only ever call this window after the first time we create the window. So we actually need this to happen a few times. In fact, we need it to happen every single time we go to the next card. So after we've configured all the things on our card, we're going to call window after 3 seconds flip card. So this way, even if we go to the next card and we wait 3 seconds, it again goes to the back. Now, one of the bugs you might have encountered is if you clicked this button many times and you go through lots of different words, you see immediately that card actually flipped. And it's because that windows after 3 seconds is counting down in the background, waiting until 3 seconds, at which point it's going to flip the card. It doesn't care that you've actually just gone onto a new card and you want to wait again 3 seconds. In order to get this to work, we actually have to give this line of code a variable. So we'll call it the flip timer. And this is now a global which we can tap into. And we can add it after a comma over here, flip timer. Alternatively, you can also go onto a new line and say global flip timer. It doesn't really make a difference other than the fact that this probably takes less lines of code. Now, once we've got access to our flip timer, we can say that every time we go to a new card, when we click on one of these buttons, we're going to invalidate this timer. So we can say window.after cancel and then pass in the ID of our flip timer. And then after we've set up this card, we can set up a new flip timer so that it waits for again 3 seconds. And now once I've added that bit of code, it should fix this bug. So now whenever I keep going or I press the check or the cross mark, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to flip until I land on a card and wait for 3 seconds before it flips. There you have it. We've got our card flipping technology added to our code. Now all that's left is to get rid of the cards that the user says they know and to create a new CSV that is going to hold all the cards from this to learn dictionary and to remove the cards that the user says they know. And then that way, the next time we run our app, it will remember which words we've learned and which words we haven't, so that we can load up only the words we have yet to learn. So for that, head over to the next lesson where we've got the final step of the flashcard project. We are now within sight of the finish line. We're on to the last step. So this is the solution for step 4. And in step 4, we want to be able to improve our program so that the words where the user clicks the check mark to means they already know that word, they know what it means, and they don't want to see it again in this list. So what we want to be able to do is to remove the words that the user knows from this dictionary of words to learn. And to do that, we have to change this command. When the user clicks on the unknown button, we're going to simply just give them the next card, which is a random word from the list of words. But when the user clicks on the known button, instead of clicking on next card, we're going to call a different function, which I'm going to call isKnown. Now, isKnown is going to be a function that's going to remove the current card from the cards that are in the list of words to learn. So what we're going to do is we're going to get hold of our list to learn, and then we're going to call the remove method. And then we're going to remove a particular element from it. And that happens to be the current card. So remember, the current card is a dictionary which we got by randomly choosing from our list to learn. So now when the user says isKnown, then the current card is going to be removed from the list of words to learn. And then after we've done that, then we're going to call next card from this particular method. At the moment, if we run this code and I just keep clicking the check mark, eventually we're going to have a very small list of words that we're going to pick from. In fact, if I go ahead and print the length of my list to learn, you can see that the first time I run this code and I click on the isKnown button, we have 100 words. But if I keep clicking on this, then you'll see that every single time I'm just reducing that list because I'm saying I already know what this word compris means. And that word is now taken out of my list of words to learn. So now that list is smaller by one entry. Now, this works right now, but if I rerun the app, then you can see it goes back right to the beginning and it has 100 words again. So in order to keep hold of the words that I still need to learn, I have to save this list to a new permanent file each time the user clicks on this isKnown button. So the way that I'm going to do that is by using pandas again. I'm going to use pandas to create a new data frame. And that data frame is going to be created from our list to learn. Now I'm going to save this as our data, and then I can say data.toCSV in order to save it as a CSV file. So I'll call this words to learn.csv. So now if I press my check mark and I take a look within my files, you can see that words to learn CSV is created. And at the moment it's got 89 entries, but if I keep clicking this a few times, it's going to reduce each time. So this is now a permanent storage of all the words that I have yet to learn. But I don't really want it randomly in the middle of my project. I want it to be saved alongside my French word CSV. So I have to change this to a file path, which is going to be data/words to learn. So let's go ahead and delete this file and do refactor. And then we're going to run this again. And next time you'll see that it appears in the right place. Now, in addition to saving it to CSV, we also have to read from that CSV, because instead of using the words from our original list, which is our FrenchWords.csv, I actually want to be able to read from my words to learn CSV instead, because that way, every single time I rerun the app, it's always going to give me all the words that I've yet to learn. So currently we're on 87. If I run this again, you can see that the first time I click on this, it's going to go to 86 instead of going back to 100. But there is a problem here though, because if I delete this file, words to learn, and I go ahead and run this, the first time this runs, it's going to crash. And we have that familiar file not found error. So we know how to deal with that. We need to catch this exception. The exception occurs right here. It happens when we try to get hold of this piece of data, which may or may not exist. So if it does not exist, so we're going to catch this except file not found error, well, in that case, we're going to be using the original data, which comes from the French word CSV. So we'll say pandas.read CSV, and then we're going to read this file, data/frenchwords.csv. So this is always going to be there because it's preloaded with our project. But if we do manage to find our words to learn, then that means this program has been run before and we've removed some of the words we already know. So we can catch that with an else statement, and we can say, well, in this case, we're going to set a global variable called toLearn, which starts out as an empty dictionary, and we set it to the data that comes from this CSV. However, if that file was not found, then this toLearn is going to be set to the original data .todict, and we're going to orient according to records as well. So now when we run our code, you can see we have no errors, and the first time that it runs, it's going to pick from our French word CSV. Now, once I've started saying, I've learnt this, I've learnt this, I've learnt this, then it's going to generate a words to learn CSV. And the next time I run this code, it's going to start using that words to learn CSV and start where I left off. Now, there is one slight weird bug to this. When you take a look at the words to learn CSV, it adds the record number to the first column every single time I run the code. So if I run this code again, you can see now I have 3 columns of all of the records. So basically, when we read from this particular CSV, we generate a data frame. And when I read from that data frame, so let's delete this and run our code again, you can see that Pandas has automatically added in these record numbers. So that gets then added back into our words to learn CSV when it saves it into the file. If we want to get rid of these record numbers, all we have to do is when we save it to the CSV, we can set a property called index to false. This way, it just doesn't add the index numbers to our newly created list. And now if I rerun this code, you can see that our words to learn CSV doesn't actually include an index. It only includes the actual records or the actual words and their English translations. That's basically it. That's all the solutions to our Capstone project. And you've now built a fully fleshed flashcard that you can use to learn languages. So you could have the front with whatever language you want and the back with the English translations. Or you can use it to learn programming facts. You could have the front with a programming word and the back as the meaning of the programming word. You could use it to study history or geography. And this program is going to help you manage all the things that you don't remember and keep showing it to you until you do. Have fun modifying this flashcard app, and I hope it'll be helpful in your studies as well. If you've built something particularly interesting, again, be sure to share with us in the Q&A so that we can all admire and congratulate you on your hard work.